I'm Kimberly from Fat Quarter Shop FlossTube, and today I'm going to show you how to make a mug rug with your cross stitch. We'll be using the Hey Pumpkin pattern by It's So Emma, and you're going to love it. To make your Hey Pumpkin mug rug, you just need a couple of things. First, you need your stitched piece from the Hey Pumpkin pattern. We stitched on burlap 10 count vintage cloth by Lori Holt. We used the called for DMC colors that are listed on the back of the pattern. You need some batting. You need some fabrics that you're going to put on the side and some fabrics for the back. Stitch with a really dark brown thread so that your stitches don't show on your cloth. We're using color 6010 by Aurifil, and we're going to accent the mug rug with Riley Green vintage trim. So let's get started. The first step in the mug rug is to cut your fabric down to a 7.5 inch square. And when I am working on cross stitch, I will actually measure the number of squares. When I'm working on a cross stitch piece, before I trim it down, I'm going to use a friction marker so I can see if it's really centered, and the ink will disappear with the heat of the iron later. So I do this, and then I'm going to kind of count my squares. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So there's 6 there, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I think I should cut it a little bit more like this. So that it is more even. So now it is perfectly centered all the way around, and I'm going to just cut around, just using those lines. And you can see that I've got it all cut. Of course, these lines will go away with the iron later, and I have plenty of room for my 1/4 inch seam. To make the mug rug, you're going to cut one piece 1 inch by 7.5 inches. I've got a vintage large trim in Riley Green that is cut 7.5 inches wide, and I have a orange plaid that is 4 by 7.5 inches. So we're going to assemble all of this together. The first step would be to put the brown fabric right side together on your cross stitch piece. Using Wonder Clips will really help, because if you use actual sewing pins, it might puncture your cross stitch piece. We're going to go to the sewing machine, stitch a 1/4 inch away, and we are going to be using color 6010. You want to make sure when doing a project like this, your thread is not too light. You need it to be very dark. So that's our first step. You also need some binding fabric that we will talk about in a little bit. So I stitched with a 1/4 inch seam. I'm going to set my seam, which means you just let your iron sit on it about 5 seconds. That's going to lock in your stitches and make it easier to press. Then I would like to press this way. So I'm going to finger press that first. If you don't want to press directly on your cross stitch, just put the tip of your iron right on the edge, and you can avoid ironing on top of your stitches. To me, I don't mind, so I'm actually going to iron on it so that I can get this friction mark off. And you can see that now that line that was there is now gone. Our next step is we're going to add rickrack and this piece. But to make this go smoother, I am going to first baste my rickrack down. I'm going to set my stitch length to about a 3.5, and I'm just going to stitch on the very edge so that it keeps the rickrack in place. I've put the very edge of the rickrack right on the edge of the brown. So we've got this basted down, and I basted it about 1/8 of an inch so that it won't show up, my stitches won't show up in my 1/4 inch seam. Now you will put your orange right side together with the edge of the brown. So we're going to stitch with a 1/4 inch seam all the way down. So when you're working with rickrack, you can make the rickrack lie either way. If you press towards the orange, it will lie this way. If you press your rickrack towards the brown, it will lie this way. So we want our rickrack to go towards the orange. So we're going to first set our seam. We're going to press toward the brown so that the green rickrack lies right on top of the orange. You're just going to put your iron right on that crease. And to make this stay down, we're going to do a top stitch right on the top of that brown. And this is how your back looks. We are going to trim this in a little bit. I have changed my thread to Aurifil color 1285 so that it will blend with the brown. I don't want my stitching to really show. I'm using an open toe foot, and I'm just going to stitch right on the edge of the brown. I have increased my stitch length to 2.5. And you can barely see the stitches. So now you can see that I need to trim this a little bit just so it's straight. So I'm just going to use that same ruler I had, and we're just going to make it all flush. And now we're ready to add the batting and the backing. We are going to add a backing and a batting that we have cut 9.5 by 13.5, which will give 1 inch all the way around. So we put our backing right side down, our batting, which is Happy Cloud 80/20, and we're going to put this on top. This is a quilt sandwich, so you can see we've got our top piece, our batting, and our backing. We're going to baste all the way around about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. And then for the inside, I don't really want to add quilting because I don't want to take away from my cross stitch piece. So I'm going to again use that darker brown and just stitch down the other side, and that will keep it all in place. I've added a bed to my sewing machine so that everything is nice and flat. I'm not going to pin or put anything in place because it is so small. I don't think you need that. And again, we're going to start with just basting around the edge. So I have everything basted around the edge. When we top stitched the rickrack down, we stitched on this side of the brown. Now I'm going to stitch on the other side of the brown. So I'm going to stitch with about a 2.0 stitch length on this side. And that is all I'm going to do before we put the binding on. If you wanted to, you could definitely quilt here to hold it down more. I definitely would not quilt on the side of the cross stitch piece. Now that we have our quilt sandwich complete, we're going to trim around the edge. And I'm going to make it a perfect rectangle so that when we put the binding on, it will look nice. So I'm going to use a Creative Grids ruler, cut one side. Turn to the next side, put your Creative Grids ruler at the top and down. That's going to create a nice angle that's straight. You might have a little bit of batting showing, and that is okay. We're going to do the same thing up here. Make sure this is flush. Trim down. This is going to create a nice rectangle. We're going to do that on the last side. And now we're ready to add binding, which is going to add the finishing touches. Your binding is what is going to go all the way around the mug rug and encompass the edge. Cut two 2-inch by width of fabric strips. We're going to join them together for binding. So to join them together, you open the two strips. We're going to place one strip right side together on the one end. We're going to pin in place a couple of times. When you're working with a plaid fabric, they do move more, so I'm going to put a lot of pins in here. And you can see I've put the right edge here. I've let some hang off, and that is so when I draw my line, first draw your line. When you're stitching, you're going to stitch from one corner to the next, and the reason I let this hang over is when you're stitching, you will be able to see exactly where to go. Because this fabric is flannel, it's a little bit thinner and it will move around more, so I'm using pins. And here you'll just use a 1.5 to 2.0 stitch length. And when you stitch to the point, you want to stitch right where that intersection is. So here's my stitched line. I'm going to trim 1/4 inch away from the edge. And you want your thread when you are piecing your binding strips to match your fabric. That way when you press, you will not see your thread. So that is why you can't see my stitches. I'm going to press open. It's important that this seam is pressed open so that you have less bulk on the front. Place the fabrics wrong sides together and it's going to create the binding. You're just going to put the edges together. Do this all the way down. Now we're going to add our binding. When I start with binding, I usually start on the very bottom of my piece. You're going to put the raw edges on the edge. So here are your raw edges. I'm going to place this down, and I'm going to leave a big gap right here, and I'm going to start stitching about right here. And I'm going to stitch a 1/4 inch away, and I will show you how to do the corners. So I'm going to leave these wonder clipped here. I'm going to start over here. I'm going to use a 2.5 to 3.0 stitch length, and when I start stitching, I'm going to stitch a few stitches and back stitch. And we're going to stitch. I'm using a 1/4 inch seam. We're going to want to stop a 1/4 inch away from the edge. So I've got this Sew Standard seam guide, and I'm going to put a little dot here, and we're going to sew to the dot. Okay, very important, do not cut your thread here. You will move your fabric and sew diagonally to the corner, and then cut. Then you will rotate your fabric. You should have a 45-degree angle here. That should be, and it should have a straight line here. If it doesn't, you're going to want to redo that corner. Fold it down, and it should be flush with the top and the side. Put it back in your sewing machine and stitch 1/4 inch away. When you get to the next corner, we're going to do the same thing. Mark a 1/4 inch away, stitch to your dot, sew to the diagonal on the edge, again, you want a 45-degree angle. You want this to be straight. Fold it back, and you're going to sew all the way until we get to the row we started on, doing the same thing on each corner. So we are back to where we started. I'm going to stitch until about right here. That's going to leave about a 2 to 3 inch opening. So I'm going to stitch and back stitch. And now we will prepare the tails. Okay, so this is where we started, and this is where we ended. And we need to trim both tails just a little bit. So I'm just going to trim this just a little bit so it's a little bit less. I need to trim it kind of in the center somewhere. So I'm going to trim it here. And now I'm going to lay this one on top. First I'm going to trim a little bit out of the, just get a little bit out of the way. And I'm actually going to trim this back a little bit more. So I'm actually going to cut back a little bit more. I'm going to put this on top, and we cut our binding 2 inches. So you want to cut 2 inches away and a little bit less. So this is 2 inches, this is the width. So if I would have cut it 2.5 inches, you would do 2.5. But I cut my width 2 inches, so I'm going to do 2 inches, and I'm going to do a little bit less. Put the ruler right there and just cut. Now we're going to join our tails, and if you don't have enough room, you can unpick some stitches if you need to. You're going to join them just like this, right sides together. You definitely need to pin here, and then we're going to use some wonder clips after we get this pinned to get some of the bulk out of the way. And you can see I'm going to stitch. You can kind of pull this out of the way. And you can wonder clip right here so it gets the bulk out of your way. We're going to go to the sewing machine and stitch from corner to corner. And on this one, I'm probably going to draw a line so it's easier for me to see. Okay, now you're going to make sure that it works and that you've got it the right way, and you can tell that you do, so you will pull this out and trim 1/4 inch away from the edge. Of your stitch, and it is going to lie nice and flat, and we're going to get the iron out. Now you want to press this seam open. It can get a little tricky because you don't have as much space. Just kind of do it a little bit. You're going to press it flat. And you'll want to press this. Get it nice and flat. And then we're going to stitch. This is where our previous stitches started and ended. So we're going to start stitching before, stitch all the way over, and stitch past your previous stitches. To complete the binding, you will pull your fabric to the back. What I like to do is iron right at the edge toward the back, and that will help the binding go down easier. If you're not comfortable ironing on your cross stitch, you do not have to do this step. I just find that it makes it easier for me. So I'm going to pull the binding to the back, and I'm going to use wonder clips to keep them in place, and it will make it go faster. You don't have to have the wonder clips, but I find that they make it a lot faster to hand stitch. I'm going to hand stitch the back. You could machine stitch if you wanted to. So now I'm going to hand stitch. I'm going to use the Clover Black Gold 9, 10, 11 needles. I'm just going to pick any of the needles. Any of them will work. I'm going to use a dark thread that matches my binding. If you have a 2-color binding like we do here, a lighter brown and a darker brown, I would pick a darker brown, which is why I've picked this. Cut a length of thread off, knot it, thread your needle, and I'm going to show you one corner. I'm going to first put my needle through the back. That's going to hide my knot. Then I will pull my needle through the very tip of the binding, so I'm right in the edge. When you're doing your stitching in the binding, you want to be right on the edge of this binding. You don't want your thread to be too far out here. So I'm just going to take little tiny bites. I go through the back and to the front, and I just travel a little bit. I like my stitches to be as small as possible, and I kind of pinch with my thumb and just hold it. You will stitch right to the intersection where you turned. So when you see these stitches, that's where you're going to stop. So I've got my stitch right. My very last stitch is going to be right in that corner intersection. Then you will take your fabric, fold it over, make sure your corner looks nice. Put a clip. If your corner is too bulky, you can cut a little triangle off. When I'm working with something this small, I tend to not need to do that. So I get the 45-degree angle right here. I'm going to come up right in the very corner, do a couple of stitches in place because that will keep that corner nice and secure. And then you will just keep stitching all the way around. You want to make sure when you're doing the binding that your thread stays on the back and does not go all the way through to the front. And that is how your corner looks nice and square, and you're just going to keep hand stitching all the way around the back. So I have stitched all the way around, and when you get to the end, just keep stitching, and you will stitch about 1 inch past your previous stitches just to keep it secure. And all of the supplies we used in this video are in the description box, and we would love if you would subscribe to our channel. Okay, so now to end the stitching, what I do is I will bring my needle up in the stitch I just made, create a loop, put my needle through the loop, and create a knot. That has knotted. Now I'm going to put my needle through the back of the binding, and I'm just going to cut right there. And I've hidden my thread. We hope you enjoy making your Hey Pumpkin mug rug. You can use it on lots of patterns, and I can't wait to see what you've done. If you don't want to have a mug rug, you can also finish the Hey Pumpkin like Priscilla Blaine did. For all of the information, visit priscillas2000.blogspot.com for all the information, and I'll see you next time.